Welcome back to Atlantic Fellows Conversations from the Climate Action Convening in Bogotá, Colombia. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney. The convening was co-hosted by the Atlantic Institute with Colombian human rights organization DEJUSTICIA, which campaigns for environmental justice. Historically dependent on fossil fuels, Colombia is particularly vulnerable to climate risk, with poor and indigenous communities the most affected. The country is showing great leadership in the action against climate change, and we join Atlantic Fellows as they hear about the work Colombia is doing and explore opportunities for transnational and international collaboration. Khalil Goga, Associate Executive Director at the Atlantic Institute, sets the scene.
I'm the Associate Executive Director for Community and Programming. My role entails bringing fellows together to think about how they can act collectively. Atlantic Fellows are change makers across the world. There are now just over 1,000 of them in over 100 countries, from artists to activists to academics, doctors, all of them working on reducing global inequities. We've gathered in Bogotá, Colombia. We'll be here for the next 5 days, bringing people together in what we call a thematic convening to discuss issues and to action plan toward the future. We are using this as a place of learning as well, engaging with activists in the area, using its vast natural resources as a place of discovery, exploration, engagement, and also to engage with the cityscape as well as the academics, activists, policymakers, and regional actors in Latin America. Bogotá is a really interesting place. It's high up in the Andes. It's also a highly industrialized city. It's the center of commerce. It's the capital of the country. There's towering skyscrapers everywhere, highways that expand across the city, huge highways, people being moved by a growing network of bicycles and buses, cars, people walking. You also see multiple types of neighborhoods. The old colonial city center with cobblestones and feels like you're in a movie. The kind of informal settlements, the high-rises, they all make up what is quite an extraordinary place. You may want to talk to Johnny Miller. He's done quite a bit of drone footage and photography around Bogotá as part of his work on unequal scenes, where he goes to different cities to talk about inequality, showing how the city is divided, to show how close rich and poor sometimes live together, and what that looks like in action. The Atlantic Institute has long had an interest in the climate space, working on climate action, knowing the significant threat to humanity, but also one of the leading causes of exacerbating inequities. So natural disasters, poverty, food insecurity can all be related to climate change. So none of our fellows can escape this. It intersects all of their work. Since the genesis of the Atlantic Institute, climate has been a factor. It's something that as our network grows, how do we bring these people together to act on climate? And that's the name of the convening, Atlantic Fellows Act on Climate. This is a long time coming. From the start, it's been an ongoing theme of discussions, convenings, online workshops. The Atlantic Institute itself also prioritized this. So in terms of the initial strategic plans, climate was underlined as something that fellows could work on. We have undertaken a number of approaches. For example, how can we use extended realities, emerging technologies to reduce our carbon footprint, but still look at collective action? We have people like Miriam Hernandez. We've supported her work on Gawi, which is an extraordinary, immersive storytelling of indigenous communities who are working to protect their environment and biodiversity in northern Mexico. Outside of that, we have over 100 fellows working in the climate space. These range from people who are doing autistic work, people in healthcare, people in government, at the United Nations, all kinds and all walks of life. So we're trying to think, how do we bring these people together? How does a small group think about this together so we can bring in the larger group? The Institute has also tried to organize a number of webinars and training, things like carbon literacy, so we get our fellows more trained. We also have looked at expanding and broadening our networks. So that's part of the reason why we're here in Colombia working with DEJUSTICIA, which is a leading human rights organization in Latin America. This particular convening was led by fellows. They put in an application to say that they would want to bring together a number of fellows with the focus on two aspects, namely a just transition and planetary health. The idea behind it was also to come to Colombia to work and see what's happening here. The Colombian government has been quite progressive in how they've approached this, and they've put people at the center of some of their approaches. So looking at indigenous communities, Afro-descendant communities, that's why it was particularly important to come here. And secondly, they also noted that the COP Biodiversity Conference, COP16, would be happening the next week in Cali, and a number of fellows would be attending that. It's the first time we were going to be represented at a COP. COP16 is really focused on thinking through indigenous ways of preservation. We're working with DEJUSTICIA to have a stall. Fellows will be presenting. We'll also be showcasing Gawi. The longer term impact following COP16 will be for fellows to work together in COP in Brazil, in Belém. So this will be the start of saying, how do we act together? What are we trying to do? And how do we have an impact at a global stage? Lastly, this was also informed by a research report that we started in 2021. One of our fellows, Brian Kamanzi, an Atlantic Fellow for Racial Equity, an engineer by training who worked a lot on South Africa's just transition, working with labor unions, was brought in. He was working with one of his colleagues, Lauren Hermanis, to produce a report to say, okay, what do we have here? How do we make sure that we maximize the potential of this group? So that's been a framing document that we've been using. He has set out a 5-year plan for the Institute and the Atlantic Fellows community to start working and having an impact almost immediately. The impact that we're looking at is at multiple levels. One will be at an individual level for fellows, so fellows learning from each other. So an engagement like this, how do we learn best practice from the Colombian context? How do we learn best practice from what's happening in the United States? 2 is, who are we able to influence? So who are the partner organizations? What are the collaborations that we need? That's why it was very important for us to work with DEJUSTICIA when we came here to Latin America with their reach. And then 3rd would be, what are our broader objectives? And that's why we've brought a large group of fellows, diverse group of fellows. And we're trying to say, how can we draw on each other's strengths, learn from each other, and think about how we're going to influence both at a local level and a global level. So, for example, one of our fellows, Dora Marema, she is a senior government official in South Africa. How do we engage with her? She comes from an activist background. What are the tools that we can use? And who is she going to work with in South Africa? Who is she going to work with regionally? And who is she going to work with internationally? So that's the approach that we'll be using. There's also a number of people from Asia and Southeast Asia, as well as Australia, coming to this convening. We have Inamil Siddiqui Khan from Bangladesh, who is heading up Oxfam in South Asia. And he's looking at how do we leverage these kinds of strategy. We've got people like Peter Gann, who's really focused on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, trying to implement those, trying to make sure that they are people-driven. And then we've got the program in Australia, the Atlantic Fellows for Social Equity, focused on Indigenous people in Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. A number of fellows from that region will also be joining us, and we think that there's really interesting connections that they could have with Indigenous communities here in Colombia as well. So there's multiple connections that we're trying to get in a pretty short period of time, but our view is that this is just the start, and we've got a long way to go, but we're hoping that this sets up the foundation for impact. Sergio and his team have been working for months, thinking about who are the external voices to bring in, what is their contribution, where are we going to go, how do we use the land as a source of teaching. For example, on the first day, we have a particular indigenous ceremony in terms of our welcome that will be led by Colombian indigenous communities. There's a river called the Alto Fucho Rio. This is one of the few clean rivers in Bogotá, a city of 9 million people, and it's protected by community members. So it's an urban area. A lot of the buildings are what we would call informal. It's a working class neighborhood, but they are land defenders. They're protecting it. They're trying to keep the river safe. They're trying to keep the river clean. It's a source of livelihood for a lot of folks. And increasingly, as Bogotá expands, it's also become a contested space. We see a lot of developers being interested in that kind of land. So that will be one of our engagements. We'll be meeting with the activists around there. And then we will also go to the Páramo. It's an ecosystem. It's about an hour outside of Bogotá. It's this beautiful area, mountainous area, really biodiverse. Colombia is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. Multiple climates across the country, but Bogotá itself also has many microclimates. We're going to try and engage with the land itself and see the land almost like a participant in our journey together. I'll be able to tell you more tomorrow about the first day and as we plan ahead for the rest of the week.
That brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you for listening. Next time, we join Atlantic Fellows on the first day of the convening and a visit to Bogotá's botanical gardens. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney, and you've been listening to Atlantic Fellows Conversations from the Climate Action Convening in Colombia. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on and subscribe to the series wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Atlantic Fellows and their work for equity, please go to our website at www.atlanticfellows.org.